chapter 49. And obviously, as we're going down through this is the blessing of Joseph, which trickles down to Ephraim and Manasseh. And we talked about that last week, and I had some handouts. I believe they're all gone. But if anybody needs one, I can try to wrangle one up if you didn't get to read that. Because there's a lot about Ephraim in the Bible, and that should give you some clarity about that. Anyway, so today we're going to start in verse number 22. Verse 22 through 26 is a very interesting little portion of Scripture because it is the blessing of Joseph. And there's some language in here that doesn't make sense to Joseph when you look at it from when they come out of captivity. But remember, all of these blessings are for when? The end times. That's right. And so a lot of this will definitely come to play as we'll be in heaven, but as the end times come to pass, as it is developing, and it goes into the tribulation period, some of these things are going to come to pass. And obviously probably through Ephraim and the descendants even of Manasseh. So let's read this. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches run over the wall. Now that is a present tense statement. And so he's blessing him, but it's also, some of it's present and some of it's future. And what he is saying is simply this, is that Joseph is this. And Joseph is this to the whole family, isn't he? He is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well. He's the one that gave the family life. And so this is an acknowledgement of who Joseph is, as well as statements, and all of these statements are end-time statements as well. How that's going to play out in the end time, I don't know. You don't know. Nobody truly knows. But it will play out in a way. Obviously, Joseph and his descendants, the descendants of Joseph, those tribes, are going to be somehow preservers of life, and they'll give water and sustenance even in the end times. And it'll be kind of interesting to see how this plays out. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God. Let me stop right there. If you notice, the next thing that it says is in parentheses, right? That's to give context to who it's talking about. It's not talking about Joseph. It's not talking about Jacob. It's talking about God. What's in the parentheses or the last name there. So before I get you all confused, let me just show you this. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him, which means that's a reference to his brothers. They tried to kill him, didn't they? But they missed, right? And then it says, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. So who is it that was with him in his captivity? God. Who is it that made him strong? It's God. And so his bow abode in strength. When a bow abides and it's not being used, that means he had the might in his hand but didn't exercise it. Remember this, Joseph could have killed his brothers, but he did not. Remember that? He exercised restraint and he showed compassion. That's what it's talking about. And then this reference that's in parentheses is about the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. The shepherd and the stone of Israel is who? It's God. It's Jesus, isn't it? Jesus is the good shepherd, is he not? And isn't he the chief cornerstone? Right. And so it comes from both God and Jacob. What is referenced here in parentheses is the humanity and the deity of Jesus Christ. Most of the time we read this, we read right over it because many times what's in parentheses isn't in all of the manuscripts. That's not necessarily the case here. The case here is that it gives context to what's being said. Because being in parentheses, there's not an English equivalent for what was said in the Hebrew, so that English, to make it have context and make sense, was put in the parentheses. Everybody gets that, right? So when you read your Bible, if you read something that's italicized, most of the time that's because it's not in every manuscript. If you see it in parentheses, a lot of times that is either that it wasn't in all the manuscripts but was placed there for context, or it is just added for context. It's English words to add the context. Everybody with me on that, right? Okay. So as we go on, and he says, even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, and the blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of thy progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. So notice that right there. This is a lineage. This is a promise and a blessing of a lineage. He's going to have a lineage just like the other brothers had. And his sons are going to have a lineage just like the brothers had. And remember, Ephraim, who is the youngest, is the blessed, and Manasseh, the oldest, is not as blessed. Everybody got that from last week, right? And so verse 27, now it shifts to Benjamin. And notice what he says. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Now, when you come into the rest of the Old Testament and you see where Benjamin was, this makes sense in two different ways. One, we know this is end-time events, and some of the end-time stuff we can't but just imagine. But it appears to be that the small tribe of Benjamin was going to be blessed with a great number of warriors, a great number of strong men, mighty men, men of valor, and they're going to be as ravening wolves. There's not a negative context in this. If we say today somebody's a ravening wolf, what do we mean? They're acting like a lunatic. They're stark raving mad. Am I right? But not this. This has the idea, and wolves were a very interesting creature the way that people viewed them. They knew that wolves would run in a pack. And when wolves run in a pack, you couldn't fight off a wolf. Remember, these people are shepherds, right? And they had lots of dealings with wolves. This doesn't say wolves, it says a wolf. That means that they're going to have some individual character. They're going to have individual strength. They're going to have individual prowess. They are going to be individual men, and that come out of this tribe. Now, there is some speculation that many of the descendants of Benjamin were great financiers, great businessmen, that sort of thing. And that this particular verse deals with that. But also out of the tribe of Benjamin, in the early stages there were great warriors. History tells us of that and how they were warriors. And some were great leaders of the Israeli army and great men of renown and so forth. Now, with all that being said, I don't understand all of this. I don't think any of us do. I don't think any of us can. But when he says this, pay attention to what he says. Benjamin shall be raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. So the context of this is that he's going to take care of the protective business in the day. He's going to take care of the military business at day, and at night, then he will be the one who divides the spoil. Unto the context here is like the rest of his sons, or the rest of the tribe, or maybe even the rest of all of Israel. And so when you look at that and it comes from a business perspective, it makes a little more sense, doesn't it? All right? So whether it is or not, and when it comes to the last days, as all of these are for the last days, we can only speculate. But notice, if you will, how verse number 28 starts and how it shifts. Because it goes right from Benjamin, one verse about Benjamin. And then the next thing you see, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it, that their father spake unto them and blessed them, every one according to his blessing. He blessed them. The blessing's over. That's a short thing for Benjamin, isn't it? When you look at all the others. I mean, he said more about Ephraim and Manasseh than he said about Benjamin, didn't he? Yeah. He said more about Zebulun, which we never hear nothing about, than he did Benjamin. And so when we come to Paul, Saul of Tarsus, he was of the tribe of Benjamin. Y'all remember that, right? And that was called the preferred tribe. I also want you to know this. The tribe of Benjamin, out of the tribe of Benjamin, came the Pharisees. They were very Pharisaical. They were the order, the elite of the Pharisees. And the reason is because they were the elite of society. They had the money, they had the wealth, and they had all of that, which leads us right back to the business aspect more than the military aspect. But I find when he drops off with Benjamin, it's just like, it just ends. It's so abrupt. You would think if you had something to say about the wealthiest and about the best, you would prolong it. You would think if Benjamin's going to be the preferred tribe, which apparently it was, that's what Paul said, didn't he? Are y'all with me? I'm not confusing you, am I? So if Paul said they're the preferred tribe, wouldn't you think there would be more? You would think so, but not so. Jacob had his say. And remember what Jacob is saying, it's what the Lord has given him. This is Scripture. This is Bible. And so as he's speaking these things, and God is revealing these things to Moses as he's writing them, they are very much for a purpose. And that little phrase about being for the last days, I believe that will come to pass in a great way that we cannot even imagine. Let me finish this chapter and we'll do 50. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is that their father spake unto them and blessed them. Every one according to his blessing he blessed them. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people, bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite for a possession of a burying place. And we talked about that chapters and chapters before. There they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife, and there they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife, and there I buried Leah. The purchase of the field, notice what he said, I buried Leah. He didn't say anything about Rachel, did he? Is that not interesting there? All right. And the purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. So he was more interested in being buried with his fathers than he was with the wife that he loved so dear. That's important, folks. The heritage of this family is more important. It's more important than any other love that was given. The love of family. Why? Because God, this is a special family. This family was called out from the Ur of the Chaldees. This family who had nothing would have been nothing. Granted, Abram was a rich man, but no, if God didn't call him, none of us would ever hear about him, would we? And God set these things in order, and God protected, and God provided, and God gave. And so what's important here is not Leah being mentioned, and not Rachel or any of the other wives. What is important here is that the fathers are mentioned, the family, his forefathers. And so he wants to be buried there. This is an amazing thing. He knows he's going to die. How many of y'all got a place you want to be buried at? How many of you just don't want to think about that? Well, you ought to. It's going to happen. I've already got my gravestone set, got my start date. We'll put the end date after I'm gone. It's already set. It's ready to roll. I was going to lay down and take a picture so you'd see where I was going, but that's kind of creepy, so I didn't do it. But it's already set. I got it set. I'm ready to go, man. Right? And so we found a place we wanted to be buried at. All right, it's a good-looking place. Let's be buried there. All right, we bought it, put the stone up, we're ready to be buried there. Many people do that. Some people go, I want to be buried, I want to be dumped in ashes out in the sea. Some people want to be dumped in ashes out in the mountains, right? I mean, it's not an unusual thing. But here he wants to make sure he's buried in that cave. Why? Because Grandpa bought it as a burying place for our family. It's important that I am buried there. And so that's where he wanted to be. That's where he's going, by the way. The purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. And when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet into the bed and yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. Just like that. Here's your blessings. I want to be buried with my family. Let me get my feet underneath these blankets and let's go on home. And it's just that simple. That's the way to die right there, isn't it? And so it wasn't drawn out. It wasn't prolonged. He had his family there. This is important. He had his family there. Family is important, guys. I am terrible with that because you guys are my family. And when it comes time to do things, I spend time with y'all when I don't spend time with my family. And I know many times that has caused problems. But family is very important. And we need to make sure that we tell our family we care about them, we love them. We ought to have a desire to be with them and to bless them and to encourage them. We ought to want to do that. Would you agree? And especially during the holidays, if you've got where you just don't get along with your family, it might be a good time to get it right. You know, time is short. I believe this with all my heart. And I don't know why I'm saying this. It's for somebody out there. Time's short. We're going to be called home soon. And we're going to gather around a great family supper table. And it's going to be better than any Thanksgiving meal we've ever had. And the Lord Himself will gird Himself and serve us. Wouldn't it be more wonderful if our own family from here was there as family with us? And wouldn't it be better to know while you're sitting there enjoying that family meal, you did all you could to make restoration, to say I'm sorry, to get it right, than to sit there knowing that you're there, and thank God you're there, but you have regrets. You know, not all tears are wiped away till after the great white throne, and I believe we're going to have lots of regrets when we get there. I can't help but think about that. God has impressed that upon my heart so many times, why He didn't wipe away tears until after the great white throne. Even 1,000 years plus we're going to be on this earth. And you know what? Some of them people are still going to be here. Some of them never heard about Jesus because we didn't tell them. And they've never heard a clear presentation of the gospel. And if they're still alive at the end of the tribulation, which very few will be really, but if they are, they're going to be here on this earth. Think about that. You ever think about that? Think about that stuff. It's not worth the regrets. It'd be much better to have a blessing. And by the way, all you can do is try. Am I right? All you can do is try. Let's do chapter number 50 and we're done with Genesis. Chapter 50 is 26 verses, but it goes extremely fast. It's very quick. And let me show you this morning and we'll be done. When I come into chapter number 50, remember the whole reason for us studying Genesis. It's just a small part of apologetics. And obviously, the Exodus is just a small part as well. All of this is because we need to know where our faith comes from. We need to know how we get the Scripture. We need to know why we believe in what we believe, why we do some of the things we do, why we don't believe in some things that some people do, and why we don't do some of the things that some religious groups do. All of this is for us to be able to stand upon the solid rock which is Christ. Remember, Genesis is all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. Jesus is the creator. Jesus is the sustainer. Jesus is judge. Jesus brings destruction. Jesus makes a way of escape, right? Jesus calls out a family. And then as we get through, we're going to see that Jesus brings a family back in. He makes a promise. He's going to fulfill the promise and set in order the things for the law to be given and then the seed to be born under the law. That's Jesus. And it's important that we understand every little bit that we can possibly understand, because there is a world out there that goes to church every Sunday that does not know an ounce of what you know right now. Are y'all listening? They don't know a fraction of what you know since you've sat here these many weeks through the book of Genesis. It's sad, isn't it? isn't it? They can tell you about the woman at the well. They can shout about the resurrection, but they don't know why. They don't know the depth. As I finish this last chapter, it's surface deep for us, but I believe there's more to this chapter than meets the eye. And I believe there's a depth to this chapter that will also play itself out in the end times in a way that will be seen when it happens. Look at this, if you will. Joseph fell on his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And so embalming was important to the Egyptians. The Jews didn't do it, but it was important to the Egyptians. Now, it was important to Joseph. Why? He's going to gather up his family, gather up his stuff. He's going to take a 3-day journey. Embalming's pretty important when you're going to be out in the sun for a couple of days with a dead body. Would you agree? All right. And 40 days were fulfilled for him. Now, this is the other reason that the Egyptians embalmed, and many times we forget this. The body dies. Here's an Egyptian, all right? You're Egyptians today. You ready? You just croaked. So your family comes in, they get the body, they drain your blood out. Now, they don't do it nice and neat like they do today. They just go ahead and cut your jugulars and drain your blood out. And then they rub your legs and your arms and they squeeze your midsections to make sure all the blood has come out of there. And then they put embalming fluid, which was probably very different than embalming fluid today. And then they wrapped you in the cloth that was also soaked in embalming fluid. And then they would wrap you in an outer cloth. You've seen mummies, right? On TV. So then they would wrap you with a mummy cloth to hold your feet and stuff, because when rigor mortis sets in, your arms would move and your legs would move and you would be all distorted. The reason for the mummy cloth over top of the embalming cloth was to hold your body in a position so that the muscles, as they contracted and so forth, wouldn't draw the arms up and you'd get in a disoriented fashion. So they'd drain your blood, they'd put embalming fluid in you, douse you with it, soak you with it. They would wrap you in embalming fluid-soaked rags and then wrap you in a mummy garment. And then they would place you in a box, we would call it a casket, but it was probably much smaller, much tighter to your body. They'd put you in that thing, and then inside of that thing would be many oils and spices, fragrant things. Then they would set you up, and they had 40 days of mourning. Your family would mourn for 40 days. So here you'd be in all your glory at home. And whatever your prominent place was, all mummified, all smelling like embalming fluid and spice, while the family wept and cried and carried on their daily activities. 40 days. All right? And then at the end of that 40 days, then they would place you, if you're just like us, we'd be poor people, they would place you in a large tomb. Like you'd have a family tomb, like a family cave, or you'd have a family burial plot. And they'd place you in that. Okay? Now, a lot of that deals with the Egyptians and their different particular beliefs in the afterlife and all of that. And they think that the 40 days, and in that 40 days, that gives the family time to bring special heirlooms and tokens and things that they would use in the afterlife, that you would be buried with a cup and a plate and a saucer and all that stuff. Right? That's Egyptian. And so Joseph doing it, obviously he was very Egyptian, but he was doing it because there was going to be transport made. Now, he's about to say something that's very interesting. And I want you to pay attention to it. He does not go and ask Pharaoh. He goes to Pharaoh's family. So think about this. Here's 40 days. They're down in Goshen. Dad's laid out. He's embalmed. He's ready for his burial. The 40 days process is happening. And while that 40 days process is happening, Joseph goes to the family of Pharaoh and tells the family of Pharaoh, my dad died. He has a burial place where he came from. I would like to take him back and bury my father with his fathers, just like you bury your father with his fathers. Remember, Joseph was a high-ranking official in Egypt. And Pharaoh would have just assumed to honor Joseph, he would give them a burial place and start a burial place for Joseph's family. And Joseph did not want to disrespect Pharaoh or go against Pharaoh's wishes, but he's also very wise, is he not? And if you go to Pharaoh's kids and Pharaoh's kids come to him and go, Daddy, you know you want to be buried with your forefathers and we want to be buried with you. I believe Joseph might want his daddy to be buried with his forefathers. Don't you think that would make a bigger difference? Is everybody with me? All right, read this. Let's see what happens. So 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed, and the Egyptians mourned for him 80, 20, 40, 60, and 10, 70 days. So it wasn't just a 40-day mourning, it was a 70-day mourning. Now, look up here. If it was you and me, it'd be 40 days. But if it was the president, it'd be 70 days. Do you understand what an honor this is and the place of honor they're giving this man who is Joseph's dad? And so all of this mourning time, he's laid out in a box at the house. Remember this. It's not like he's buried and they're going to dig him up. He's just laying in a box. That's creepy. Is it not? 70 days. All right, mathematicians, that's like 2.5 months. Not quite. 2 months and a couple days. That's like if that happened to you today, it's going to be February before they move you out of the living room. That's creepy. Okay? And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, not Pharaoh himself, saying, If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die in my grave, which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There shalt thou bury me. Now, therefore, let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. Tell it to Pharaoh. Tell it to Pharaoh. I'll come back. I'm coming right back. Remember, it's only 3 days' journey. I'm coming right back. I'll be back. I'm not leaving. I'm not going off to some other place. I'll be back. And Pharaoh said, so obviously the family spoke to Pharaoh. Would you agree? So Pharaoh said, Go up and bury thy father according as he made thee swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph, and his brethren, and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks. I don't know if you see this or not, but this is a picture of a return back. Now, we know, because we've read the Bible, that the book of Exodus is all about exiting and going back into the promised land, right? But remember, all of these things have some last days to it too. It's interesting to me, and I don't know if you paid any attention to this, but there are so many people that are taking their Jewish family remains and moving them to Israel to bury them there. Have you paid attention to that? Not only are families moving to Israel, the Jews are in an outright movement into Israel, but they're taking the bones of their forefathers back to Israel to be buried in that land. Now, I cannot help but think that there's something about that here that's speaking about that in these end times. We are in the end times. Everybody with me? Now, maybe I'm reading into it. I don't want to do that, but there just seems to be something about that. And I didn't even think about that till I had studied this chapter months ago when I did my notes, months ago. And I was watching a thing on YouTube. It was a CBN News blurb or whatever that was on a YouTube video. And it was about all these Jews taking their bones and the ashes of their relatives to Israel with them. And as long as they proved their Jewish heritage and they did the DNA on the remains, they paid that. They had to pay for DNA for the remains. If they were Jewish, they could bring them into Israel and bury them there. That's cool, isn't it? And so I got to thinking about that, and I thought, there might be something to this. So, hey, maybe it was just for me to think about it. I don't know. Let's keep going. So, verse number, 7? I'll start 7. And Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land. They left the flocks and the children in Goshen. Verse 9. There went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. So not only did Pharaoh tell them to go, but Pharaoh provided them protection. Pharaoh provided them not only protection, but provision. And so a great company of horsemen. Remember, there's only, do you remember, was 70? Was it 70 people? Y'all remember? I think it was 70, wasn't it? And yeah, and they're leaving the flocks and they're leaving their children behind, the little ones, and obviously some to take care of. So they would have been a small family taking Dad back. Pharaoh protected them. All these people, yeah. And so obviously Joseph had servants and stuff, right? And he was in command, so he probably had his. Yes, sir. Pharaoh, yeah, saved Egypt.
So Egypt has to pay this man great tribute in reference to his father.
Right.
It was just a natural thing for all these Egyptians to go.
Exactly, yeah. He saved.
Joseph was a type of Jesus. Jesus died for the sins of the world.
Yes, amen. And remember, there in Egyptian culture, they worshiped ancestors. They worshiped the father and the man. So when Pharaoh became Pharaoh, he's God on the earth. He got the Spirit of God to be God on the earth from his father. Remember? We talked about that right in the beginning of when he started talking about Egypt. And so with that being said, they're showing not only Joseph, but his father. Because if Joseph was that mighty of a man, obviously his father was too. Right? Isn't that interesting? Yes, sir.
Talk about other things, foreshadowing of the end times. It's cool to see the Egyptian culture protect these Jews that's going back. Could that be somebody protecting Israel in a sense, other than Jesus? I know Jesus can protect Israel in the end times. Could there be somebody supporting Israel in the end times? Kind of like what that.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure whether that would be, because I think Israel stands alone. And Egypt's always a type of the world, but remember, Jesus was sent down into Egypt, remember? The wise men brought the provisions, didn't they? The gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh for him to go into Egypt and stay. And then he comes back up out of Egypt into the homeland to do his ministry, to fulfill his role. Well, that's the same thing that's happening here. Not necessarily right here, but when we get to the Exodus. They are in Egypt. Egypt is a type of the world. The world is going to turn against Israel. And then they will be delivered through the power of God, delivered out. Here's the same thing. Joseph didn't go to Pharaoh because Pharaoh could say no. Joseph went to his children, his family. Because he knew, his children could persuade him to see the importance of the father aspect. Make sense? And so when we go to the world with the message of the gospel, what do people have to see first and foremost? Not just Jesus. They've got to know God. They've got to know that they are made in the image of God. They've got to know that God spoke this world into existence. They've got to know that God sent a sin curse to this world and Jesus is the payment for it. Amen? Y'all with me? There's a lot in that, isn't it? And there's a lot more to this chapter, I think, than what meets the eye. And probably if you could talk to somebody who really just studies Genesis a lot, they probably could come up with something a little deeper. But anyway, let's finish this. I'll be done. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. Here's 7 more days, plus the travel days. So he's been in a box a while, hasn't he? And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians." Wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. And I forgot to write down what that meant. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded them. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father after he had buried his father. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, "Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him." It's a natural course of events there, is it not? So all of a sudden now, Dad's gone. Joseph is running this place, and he could have us killed immediately. Notice what they do. And folks, this is the actual fulfillment of that vision, that dream that he had. Most every scholar says, as they bowed before him, they were bowing before him as an Egyptian. But here they are bowing before him as their brother. And so what I'm about to read to you is the fulfillment of that dream that he had all those years ago. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, thy father did command before he died, saying, so shall ye say unto Joseph, forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sins, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept, and when they spake unto him. He had no intention of doing them any harm. He had already promised them. His word was still good. Right? But those brothers had already proved to him their word was not but so good. And so they're in petrified mode. And he's crying, not because they think he would kill them. He's crying because they think he's like them. You ever wonder why Jesus wept? Because his heart was broken, right? But remember, he said, as he looked at Jerusalem, he wanted to gather them as a hen would gather her chicks and protect. His heart was broken for his people. And his heart was broken because they just couldn't see him as he really is. And Joseph's heart was broken because his brothers really couldn't see him as he is. And I hazard to say right now, today, we don't really see Jesus as he truly is. We mess up on God all the time. We sin all the time. We do things that are so offensive to a holy God. And God has never one time left you nor forsaken you. He has never one time beat you over the head or beat you down. He's corrected us, but He's never hurt us. And there's nothing you can do on this earth that can hurt Him to the place where He cast you out. Isn't that awesome? Joseph being a type of Jesus. Now watch this. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face. Stop. Remember when they fell down before? They fell down before the Egyptian. Remember when his brother revealed who they were? And he fell on them and kissed their neck and they fell down, right? But here is this fulfillment. They have come together. They know they are nothing in the sight of the Egyptians. They know that they feel like Joseph kept them alive for their father's sake. He had them go. He went and brought his father back, remember? So in their mind, They're thinking Joseph's going to just do us in, do us in, do us in. He's going to judge us harshly. He's going to treat us harshly. He's going to mistreat us. Joseph is going to do more and more and more. Not less and less. And that's the way we view. And so they fall down on their face. So his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants. Remember the dream? They'll fall down and say they are servants. They'll be in subservience to you. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? Fear not. Am I in God's place? No. I'm not God. I'm not going to do this to you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to do that. But as for you, this great statement that he makes, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. All of those people meant it for evil. Those Roman soldiers, those guards, those temple guards, those Jewish leaders, they meant it for evil, to crucify Jesus, to have Him put to death. But God could not save us without the death of His only Son. Y'all get that? The gospel is right here. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And He comforted them and spake kindly unto them. And now comes the death of Joseph, and we're done with Genesis. But that last little portion is absolutely amazing to me. It's absolutely beautiful to me. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. He was old. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. So the third generation of Ephraim, the second generation of Manasseh. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you. Remember, Joseph was second to the youngest. But he comes up to his brothers and says, I'm about to die. That has always bothered me. It's puzzled me. Because the context here of Joseph said unto his brethren, it's like his brothers. It's not necessarily just his clan, his family. And so are all the brothers still there? Or is everybody still alive and he's going to die first? It sure seems that way in this. I may be wrong, but it sure seems that way. I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land into the land which He sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. Joseph wanted his bones taken too. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. He's not going to stay there. He's going home too. But at the start, he's going to Egypt. You know what fascinates me? Nobody goes to Pharaoh and asks for Joseph to be buried with his father. You think about that? Where's Ephraim? Where's Manasseh? Why aren't they talking to the Egyptians? I think Exodus chapter number 1 gives us the real answer. And that is that the Pharaoh dies and Joseph dies, and there arises others that know not Joseph nor Pharaoh. Life happens, people. But all of this was for good. God meant it for good. All right. So we covered a lot of ground, did we not? All right. And there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, and a lot more than I can find just studying for Sunday school. But I guarantee you there's something in here that we're not seeing. There's some deeper stuff in here that we're just not grasping. There's some things in here, especially as we deal with the end times, that we're not fully seeing. And maybe it's not for us to see. But I think there's a depth to this book that we cannot find. Not in our day, It's not for us. It's to us, but not for us. Make sense? And I believe one day it's going to come alive in a special way. Just like I believe the book of Hebrews is going to come alive in a special way. Things are going to just be just like it says. Anyway, we'll talk about that another day. Let's go to the Lord in prayer and be dismissed, and hopefully you guys will have a good day, and I'll see you this evening.